Hello, my name is Roberto, and today I will be talking about the Bonus Army and how their acts created new programs and a change in the way the United States dealt with jobs and how to create jobs throughout the Great Depression. To begin with, the Bonus Army wouldn't have happened without the end of the First World War. In Europe, war breaks out in 1914 after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and everyone joins in to fight. The U.S. joins the Allied powers in 1917 to fight the Axis power in Europe. After this, 1918, the war is won, with the Allies winning and the Americans are able to come home. Economy is booming during this time because of all the jobs created from the war. After this, the Adjusted Service Certificate law is passed, which is also known as the Adjusted Compensation Act or the Bonus Act. It was created by President Warren Harvey, and it was so that veterans would be paid for every day that they had for every day served in Europe or at home. It states that every soldier would receive $1 each day served in the U.S. and $1.25 each day served overseas. It had a maximum payment for veterans that were stateside of $500 and $625 for veterans who served underseas. And this was to be paid in 1945. After the war, though, after the 1920s, the Great Depression happened. These were hard times for all Americans because of the lack of jobs that were available at the time, and the inflation didn't do them any good. The Great Depression started on October 29, 1929, after the crash of the stock market, 5 years after the certificate was passed. The average income for an American family dropped by 40%. Many things were done to try to counter the effects of the Great Depression by Hoover, like soup kitchens, and some jobs were created, like 6,000 jobs were created in New York by having vendors sell apples for 5 cents. The peak of the worst part of the Great Depression happened between 1932 and 1933. Some of the first solutions that were made during this time, which didn't really work, was the soup kitchens, like I said earlier, and the job that created vendors to sell apples or other vegetables and fruits. Congress overrode a veto that would allow veterans to be paid half of their bonus in loans. That wasn't enough, and veterans wanted to be paid in full in actual money due to the hard times that were happening. After their demands were not met, veterans marched on to Washington to protest. 15,000 veterans and their families gathered for the first march in May, led by Sergeant Walter Waters. 20% of these veterans that showed up were disabled. The wife and owner of the Washington Post, Evelyn Walsh McLean, went and saw from her house the marchers, the veterans marching. And this is what she said: "I was horrified to see the plain evidence of hunger in their faces." After they marched to Washington, the veterans stayed there for another month. And on June 15, they were waiting for the Patman bill so that they could receive their payments. Wright Patman was a Texas representative and fought for the veterans so that they would be paid. His bill was passed by the representatives, but the Senate turned it down for the first time. The veterans and their families created makeshift homes outside of D.C. to keep on showing their discontent on the bonus certificate and to protest so that they could be paid their bonus. The organizers of these camps wanted to make sure that these places wouldn't become bums. They let out strict rules in the community, like no alcohol, no fighting, and no communists. Also, people from Washington supported them by giving them food and cigarettes. Action was bound to happen by both sides, either by the government or by the veterans. So action did happen eventually. The Secretary of War, Patrick Hurley, had enough with the protesters and ordered the Washington police force, led by Pelham Glassford, to evacuate the campgrounds, to evacuate the veterans from their campgrounds so that they could demolish all the buildings and have new government buildings built. This made matters worse and created conflict between the veterans and the police force, which led to the conflict between veterans and officers. The officers received debris and bricks thrown by the veterans, which led to a fractured skull of one officer, and this made the officers fire back with gunshots. 2 veterans died, and one died instantly, and the other died from their wounds. After that, President Hoover had to send in a force to remove the protesters from their makeshift homes that they've been living in. This force was led by General Douglas MacArthur, and it included the 12th Infantry Regiment, the 3rd Cavalry Regiment, and 6 light tanks. The cavalry charged, and after they charged, the infantry, with their fixed bayonets and tear gas, went into the camps where the veterans and their families had been, and they removed them from the camps, destroying it with fire. The aftermath isn't pretty. After these events, people were outraged for what happened after the removal of the bonus army and their families. They thought on how the president gave them such poor treatment after they risked their lives to defend this country. Like I said before, 2 veterans died during this protest after they were removed. One of them died instantly, while the other died later of their wounds. And like I said before, a police officer was injured with a fractured skull after a brick hit him in the face by one of the veterans. During the struggle of getting them out of the camps, 2 babies died after the 10,000 inhabitants of the camps left. And then after that, they put the camp into flames. And it could be seen from all over Washington. This is what President Hoover said after the whole ordeal. The whole scene was pitiful. The veterans were ragged, ill-fed, and felt themselves badly abused. To suddenly see the whole encampment going up in flames just added to the pity. So after this, President Hoover, it was the end of his presidency, and a new president came into town. In November, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was sworn into presidency, and he was determined to lead the people out of the Great Depression. He created a New Deal, which gave programs to the people so that they can work. Some of these that really helped provide works for the veterans and the population was the Civil Works Administration, which would provide jobs for people by making them create roads throughout the United States. Another thing that he created was the Public Works Art Project, which helped people with artistic skills be able to get jobs. And about 16,000 new sculptures, pieces of art around the United States were created because of this. In conclusion, the whole ordeal ended up to be good because it would help us revise and for us not to make the same mistake that we have done before. And by this, I say that the GI Bill was passed by Congress in 1944, near the end of the Second Great War, to help veterans transition to a civilian life and to acknowledge the debt that we owe them for risking their lives to defend this country. Thank you. Have a good night.